this is Poo Noob, and today's indie game dev interview is with Mark Smith from Bacon Bandit Games. So it's about Letter Quest, Grimm's Journey. How are you, Mark?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much for asking. So I think just to break the ice a little bit, I'll give you a super simple one. Top five games of all time. Go.
Oh man.
I'm joking. You don't need to answer that. I think I'm more interested to know what games have you been playing recently, if you even have the time.
I don't have a lot of time, but recently I did pick up Dark Souls 3, and I'm a pretty big fan of that. I haven't played the other ones in the series. I played Bloodborne though, and I like that a lot. So try and sneak in a tiny bit of time here and there. So that's been taking up any gaming time I do have lately.
I hear it's quite different. I am not really a Dark Souls player. I just got Dark Souls 1 like a week ago, and I played a couple hours of it. I'm liking it, but I think they say Bloodborne is a bit more faster pace or something.
It really is, yeah. Bloodborne, you get a lot more rewarded for aggressive play.
Right.
So like you can get your health back if you get damaged and stuff. So going back to Dark Souls now is a little bit, it is slower paced, and it's a little bit harder, I find, because you have to kind of hide and block and do that kind of thing.
It's amazing how just that one little change can make a big difference.
It really is, for sure.
So tell us a bit about yourself. You're not doing this full time, right? You have a job.
Right. I do. I have a full-time day job. I actually work at the university here in Winnipeg, and I'm doing augmented reality work there for them.
Ooh.
And so I'm doing that full-time during the day, every day, and then in the evenings and weekends, I am making games for my company.
Okay, that's interesting. Are you doing something like AR classrooms or something?
No, actually, I'm working on I can't say too much about it, but I'm working on a research project with one of the professors there.
Right. So it's a fully paid position, right?
Yes.
That's pretty cool. Is AR something new that you just got into, or it's been a passion of yours since a long time ago?
Before I got the job there, actually, I worked on a project here in Winnipeg for a company called Zenfry, and we built an augmented reality game called Clandestine Anomaly for mobile phones.
Oh, okay.
So I've got a bit of experience with that because I led that project, led the team on that, like the tech team on that. So we built that over like about a year, just over a year.
Right. And your studio is just the two of you, right? You and Jake?
Yes.
So what made you guys decide to open a studio on your own? You met at a game development company or something, right?
Yeah, we used to work at a company called Antic Entertainment in London, Ontario, which is also in Canada. And we became pretty good friends while we were working there, and just like talking about game ideas and, coming up with different things. You go on like a coffee walk in the afternoon, have some random ideas about things and talk about things and stuff, sometimes based on what you do at work and sometimes just random ideas you have and everything. And I eventually had to leave there, and I came back to Manitoba, which is where my family is. Mm-hmm. And a little while after I came back, we kept in touch and kept talking and decided that, maybe we should try making our own games and see how that goes. So that's how it all started.
Right. And what do you do in your studio, and what does Jake do? Like, what are your roles?
Sure. Right now, I tend to take care of code, so like all of the tech side of things, marketing. I've also built the website, like the various websites that we have. Right. Dealing with customer complaints and everything. Most of the QA or quality assurance, and then Jake and I both share the game design, and then he handles all of the art.
Right. Is sound contracted out, or?
Yes, we've contracted that out for our game so far.
Right. So tell us a bit about Letter Quest Grimm's Journey. It came out in 2014.
Yeah, so it's had quite the history compared to most games. So, most people I talk to, the advice they give is, turn out a small game as quick as you can, get that experience, fail with that like most people do, and then move on, try it again and again and again. But, at the previous company I worked at, we had built a handful of games while we were there, and we had this idea for Letter Quest and decided, it kept kind of growing over time, which I think is a very common problem for a first game in a studio.
Right, scope creep and stuff.
Exactly. So, and we kind of reined that in a couple of times, and then it grew again. And because I worked on it for almost 2 years full time, because I was full time on this when I moved back here. That
Oh,
was
okay.
that was like 3.5 years ago now. And so we worked on this for a long time, and originally letterquest was, well, let's do this for mobile phones, so we did it for like the Apple App Store and Google Play. But since then it's just kind of kept going. We've had other game ideas, we've worked on prototypes, we've done game jams, we've had other ideas, but through just random things that have happened and people we've met, letterquest has ended up coming out on just about every platform out there.
Right. And how did you guys get the idea for this game? Where did it come from, and how did you start developing that idea into an actual game?
It went through a lot of different iterations. We started actually just with the idea that what if we tried to make a game that, isn't in such a crowded genre like some of them. A lot of people will start, they'll have an idea for a platformer or, a
Action
puzzle type
RPG,
game.
something, yeah.
Exactly, right? And there's so many of them out there that the competition is very, very stiff. And we were thinking for our first game, maybe we try something that maybe has a bit of a smaller audience, but we actually have a good chance of making a bit of a splash there. Like we might actually get a bit of a following. So we just had the simple idea of let's make a word game. And it went through, like, the reason it took so long is because we went through so many different iterations. The game started off as like a real-time, spell as fast as you can, one-on-one combat kind of thing. And everybody that we let try it was like, this is really stressful, and I don't know that I'm having fun. So we looked at that and thought, okay, well, that's, we're not trying to stress people out. That's not really, wasn't our goal, right? We were just trying to make something that was more interesting. And so we scaled that back. We went to, an endless mode, which was all the game was for a while. So it was jump in, spell words until you lose, start over, and it was kind of a roguelike thing. Then we abandoned that because since we were targeting mobile, we were like, maybe at the time, in 2013, I guess it was 2014, it's like that's maybe too hardcore for what we thought people would like on mobile. So then we went to like a stage-based approach, and then we went to like the world map that we have now, and then we went back from that for a while to something else, and then we tried the real-time thing again. Like, it seriously went all over the show. I would not recommend that style of development for people's first game. But sometimes, you kind of have to follow it, and we were lucky that, we had enough money and everything, just because I, burned through a lot of my savings that I'd made from different jobs. And so we took the time to do it and make the game that we wanted. And I'm really glad we did, because had we released it any time earlier, I don't think it would have been anywhere near the game it is now.
So it's basically 100% funded by you and Jake?
Yes, Jake kept working full time while we were developing it, because the art didn't take, there was a lot of work there, but it didn't take as much as doing all of the code and a lot of the design and everything too. So no, I funded all that with just the savings and money I had saved up.
So you were talking about scope and scale earlier. So did people in your circle look at the game and think it was too big for your first time?
Quite a few people did, and I can understand why they thought that, because, to get through the game once, like if you run through as fast as you can for a new player, you're probably looking at 6 to 8 hours, depending on how good you are.
Right.
And if you want to get everything in the game, you're closer to probably 15 hours. I've seen anywhere from like 12 to 20 hours.
That's a good number.
It is, and that's a lot of content to balance.
Right.
Because it's all stage-based and everything, and I didn't realize it at the time, but, there's no programmatic way of balancing the game that I found. Everything has been tuned by hand, is by me playing and playing and playing again and again, and trying my best to come up with something that seems fair. And that was a bit of a big job. And yeah, I think at that point people are right that it was a little bit too big for a first title, but at least we got it finished. We got something released, so we're very proud of that.
But I do notice a trend these days. A lot of successful developers, they tend to be their first game and it's pretty big. Or maybe because they're successful and we know about them, and there's like, for every success there's like 100 other failures or something. I don't know, but yeah, that's crazy. Like, you had to balance it by hand. It's like there's no algorithm or something for you to...
No, and to anybody out there that's considering making a word game with any kind of combat or an RPG system,
right,
the really crazy part, and this gets into very subtle design for a second, but
Sure.
You know, if you're building something like, say, a Final Fantasy game, or if you take a look at a game like Chrono Trigger, you know, your character has an attack stat. He might do 20 damage. So they might roll a dice and you might do between, 18 and 22 damage or something, right?
Right.
But in LetterQuest, it's all based on the word that you spell. And so, somebody could spell a 3-letter word with common letters and do maybe 10 damage. They could spell a 10-letter word with really uncommon letters and do 110 damage. Right. And so trying to plan for that range is actually one of the most difficult things in the game, because you're never going to hit it perfect. You just have to try and find a sweet spot where you're going to have the odd person that finds it too easy and somebody that finds it too hard, and we certainly do. But I tried my best to kind of aim for the middle, because it was a bit of a nightmare to balance, to be honest.
And it's because it's it doesn't use the traditional RPG system like stats.
Correct.
It depends on the word that you spell.
Yes.
Okay. Regarding balancing, like, what have you learned from doing balancing by hand for this game? Like, what would you have done differently? Hire QA testers, maybe?
Yeah, I think some, like, having testers would help, certainly. But the biggest thing, probably my takeaway from this whole experience, has been trying to find a way to balance out player skill, versus the actual hard numbers that are in the game. And so the last job that I had, I actually worked with a guy that was very into designing board games, card games and things like that. And I actually learned a lot from him. This was a guy that was very, very, like, this was his first job in the games industry when I was working with him. And yet I learned a lot from him game design wise, because some of the systems in those games and board games and everything are very elegant. They're
Right.
very well designed. They have to be. And they have to be very understandable to players. And it just, going through this whole process made me very, very aware of subtle changes to the design can actually be a huge issue when it comes to balancing. So you really have to pay careful attention to, the actual side effects of the things that you're changing, because you don't really realize it sometimes at first. And then you're like, wait a minute, the fact that we can spell words like this and have such a wide range of damage, like, what am I going to do about that? So I think if I were to make another game like this, or if I were to do this over again, I think I would probably try and look at a way of addressing that. I'm not entirely sure what that would be yet, but I'd try and find a way to kind of squish that range down a bit so that it's not so wildly varying.
Right. So do you have confidence that you can actually design a board game now?
A board game? I don't know. I think that one's pretty challenging from what I've seen. There's a lot of trial and error and a lot of very specific design skill set that goes into that. And it's not like changing code. You have to reprint stuff sometimes. Yeah, a lot of time. Yeah, like a lot of these people will do like paper prototypes, right? Like,
yeah.
So they're writing their stuff by hand on paper and markers and sticking things on cardboard and that kind of thing.
Yeah, a friend of mine is actually designing a board game, and he printed everything very nicely on very nice colored, like, cards, and laminated everything. Cost him quite a bit. And the marketing for board games is very different. It's very brick and mortar kind of marketing. You have to go to cons and stuff, where the biggest audience are usually.
Yes, yeah.
So that's extra cost right there. Regarding the words, which database did you use? Like, what's out there? Let's say a developer wants to make a word game. Like, what database of words should they look at? And which one did you use?
I ended up using 6 different ones. I should probably do a blog post on this at some point, because I spent a lot of time on this, and it's actually been the greatest source of grief, because you'll get people that love the game and they'll try and spell one word, it won't work, and they'll lose the stage they're on, and they'll give me like a 2 out of 10 review because they're so angry. Or I'll get an angry email. And yeah, I ended up using 6 different dictionary sources, and they were all free. And that was the biggest thing, was that any of the ones that were actually good, you have to pay for them, and it's a significant amount of money if you're doing a game, because it counts as interactive content, and there's different licensing and everything, which at the time I had no money for licensing. So
right.
So yeah, I should probably do a post about that at some point because it's actually quite complicated. I had to merge 6 different sets, remove duplicates and try and find the best definitions. And that's certainly why some people are familiar with the game will know, sometimes you get a weird definition that doesn't quite look right, or it's a very uncommon way of defining that word. And that's why, right? Because these are coming sometimes from dictionaries that are 50 years old.
Right. So, the interesting about this game is one of the interesting things. It was released in 2014, and you guys released a remastered version in 2015. Like, why did you come to the decision to develop a remastered version after only like 1 year?
Yeah, so now now we can talk about it, and it makes more sense because the Xbox One version of LetterQuest Remastered just came out on April 8th of this year. So basically what happened is the original one, I wrote it in Flash. So I used ActionScript 3 as the programming language and the Starling framework, which is great. However, you can target mobile with that. You can do PC and Mac, but that's it. And so we looked at that and said, I think we can make this work on consoles. I think we can fix a lot of the things that we didn't get a chance to do in the game before. And the other big headache we had was that the animation library we used in the original, something happened with it with an upgrade to a new version between it and the new version of the Adobe Air runtime.
Right.
And we actually couldn't add any more animations to anything. The system was broke, so anytime we changed anything, we actually couldn't rebuild the game.
Oh, so it was built ground up, pretty much.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So I rebuilt the entire game over the course of 6 months in my evenings and weekends, and rebuilt the entire thing in Unity.
Does it really feel like basically you're starting from zero, or doesn't really feel from zero because you already have something to work with?
It wasn't bad, but anybody that's experienced in Unity and anything that's not Unity will understand this, that Unity is meant to be very much a visual type of editor, right? So you're actually seeing what you're doing, you're laying things out, on the screen. Whereas the old way of doing it was entirely code-based, right? So all my windows, all the user interface, everything was just defined in code. So bringing that over to Unity was actually a bit of a pain because now I've got this nice editor, which is great, except I'm recreating very specific programmatic things from Flash, and I'm having to actually try and recreate those in Unity in a non-code way. So it was actually a lot of work, and it was very strange. I think it would have been easier to go to something else that was very code-heavy.
Right. Is the mobile version also the remastered version? Or is just the original?
Yeah, the mobile one is still just the original LetterQuest. It's the Flash version.
Right. Have you ever thought of trying Unity mobile, or was it just too difficult to work with?
No, we've actually, the last project I did professionally at a day job was using Unity, and it was for mobile. But the thing that's held us back so far has actually just been time, because I'm kind of running out of time. Like the Xbox One port, I did 100% myself. I handled that whole thing over the course of a couple of months in my evenings. And the other platforms that we're looking to target have hired some outside companies to help with that because I completely ran out of time on this.
Right, because the Xbox One has a deadline or something.
Pardon me?
The Xbox One launch, it had a deadline or something. Did it?
No, it was fine. We just the reason we chose that one is because Microsoft is actually really nice with their dev kits, and so when you sign up for their ID at Xbox program, they give you 2 free dev kits.
Oh, okay.
And so that actually made it a lot easier. Like you pitch your idea to them, and there's a whole bunch of information on their website about it if anybody's curious. But you pitch an idea to them, and simplified version is if they like it, they sign you up with this, and they give you a couple of dev kits, which is really quite nice because the process is a little more difficult for Sony or Nintendo.
Right.
So that's why I started with that one, because it was like, okay, well, I have these dev kits, and I can get going on this anytime, so why not?
I've heard that Microsoft has they're friendlier to indies compared to the other guys.
Yeah, I don't know compared to the other ones because I'm, just kind of ramping up on some of the stuff with the other ones. But Microsoft has certainly been great to work with. They're very responsive, very friendly, and very understanding when it comes to the fact that, I've obviously never done a console game before. So this is a very different process for me. And they've actually been really good about that and very helpful the whole way. So
So they've been even helpful like on the technical side.
Yeah, and just trying to line up dates with things and figure things out. Like they keep in contact pretty regularly, and the teams they have are actually great. And if somebody doesn't know something, they redirect you to the right person pretty quickly. And it's actually really nice to work with them.
So are you thinking of the PlayStation and maybe Nintendo?
Yeah, we are. We're looking into both of them. The PlayStation 4 version and PS Vita as well, I believe. We're doing like a cross-buy thing on the two of those. So we're just trying to get some dates lined up for that because there's the whole approval process and certification and all that stuff. So we're just kind of working through all of that right now.
I'm pretty... I look in the Vita subreddit quite a lot. I don't have a Vita myself. I just like to read what they say. And they're pretty supportive of a lot of new games, however small or big it is, because they're just hungry for new games. I think you have an audience there.
I hope so, and I hope that the Vita version ends up being pretty good, because you've probably heard then, if you're familiar with that, like the Vita is an interesting system, and there's a lot of work people have to do to make things run really well on there, because it's kind of limited in some strange ways, it seems. And certainly when you're working with Unity, there's some complications there, and you have a few extra things to deal with. So I'm hoping that we can make it as good as we can and that people will be happy with it.
Right. So how about marketing wise? Is Microsoft helping you in any way to market your game while it's on the Xbox One store?
So far they haven't been. I'm hoping that there's something with that. Basically what you get is you get put on a new releases list, like on the front page of the store. Right. Yeah, and so we lucked out a little bit there because, well, I think we did anyway. I'm not really sure if it's good or bad, but we were beside a couple of pretty big titles. Like we're right in between Quantum Break and Dark Souls 3.
Right.
And so some people said, well, that's probably bad because, nobody's going to buy your game over those. Yeah. And I actually thought the opposite. I'm like, depends. If somebody's there, I have a feeling there's a lot of people, because a lot of my friends certainly fall in this camp. They will go there, they'll pick up Dark Souls 3 for themselves or see it there, and then they've got young kids, and they'll see, hey, what's this game? Because there's not a lot of really kid-friendly content. Right. On these systems, and maybe consider picking that up, right? So right. I think if anything, it's just getting more eyes on the game, which is great.
Yeah. I mean, it is between the two biggest games on Xbox One currently.
Yeah.
So what about your own marketing efforts? Like, when did you start marketing Letterquest? Was it like right in the beginning or just before launch? Somewhere in the middle?
I waited till almost launch on, like, way back on the original Letterquest for mobile. I waited until we almost launched, and we got fairly lucky because Apple ended up featuring Letterquest on the App Store, which was cool. And I still don't know how that happened, and that bothers me a little bit because I'd like to be able to share with people and say, hey, I contacted this person and it happened. I got an email, and it was very strange and kind of very lucky that I happened upon this, because I get a lot of emails once you're about to release a game, right? Lots of people want a review copy, or lots of people want to talk or whatever it is. So I actually had an email in my spam folder, and it was actually from somebody from Apple. Oh. And they were asking for marketing assets for the game, so that they could do a feature on it.
Nice.
And right away, of course, you're like, well, this can't be real, right? This, because you're tired and you're trying to launch a game. Well, yeah, and you're like wondering what's going on. So I have no idea what was in that email that made it, but certainly a huge tip to anybody out there, in case you haven't thought of it, total no-brainer. But please add like anybody at apple.com to your whitelist, just in case, because I have no idea how that happened. And it was, it was like 4 a.m, and I'm looking through my spam and should be sleeping. And I'm always like, wait, what is this? Are you kidding me? Like, what's going on?
When did the mobile versions come out?
That would have been
2013?
2014, I believe, around, in February, I think.
So roughly around the same... It's the same year that the Steam version came out, right? The original Steam version?
Yeah, the Steam version came out, I believe, October or November of that year, because we got to work on making the Steam version after the mobile one was out.
Right. Was Google Play... Did Google Play get the game straight away as well, together with Apple?
They got it shortly after. I think we waited a tiny bit. I can't remember how long exactly, but it's probably a couple weeks.
Did you feel that your game being a mobile game first helped or hurt the Steam version? Because sometimes I do notice that people like, oh, it's a mobile port. You know, that kind of reaction.
Yeah, for sure. And I think overall, I think that it helped. But some advice to people out there would be don't just port your mobile game as is to Steam and expect people to care or
Right.
be kind to you.
Right.
So what we did was we actually changed a big chunk of the game. We added, keyboard support so people can type the words if they want. We added like rebindings on the controls, right? We added resolution options, music and like sound and volume sliders. Basically all the things that people on PC will expect.
Yeah.
And actually people were quite kind about it. There was the odd person that was like, oh, it's a mobile port, like pass.
Right.
But actually a lot of people were really friendly, were really nice, contacted us and said, that's great. Finally some developers that get it. They're trying to actually make this for PC. And certainly we wouldn't, like, if we ever had a mobile game and we tried porting it to PC and it just didn't feel right, we would not even release it because we've played those too. We've played the games where you can tell somebody did it in a few weeks. They put no effort into it, and it plays horribly on computer.
Yeah, they just port it. Like they just click a button, port. Like
Yeah, basically, yeah.
um. So yeah. You were also in a couple of bundles. How was that? How was that feeling? Like, was there a fear of um your game being undervalued because bundles they tend to be pretty cheap? And maybe did you have the fear that like, oh, once it's in a bundle nobody's gonna buy it until it's in another bundle?
Yeah, I actually did have that fear for sure. I think a lot of indie developers are going to have that same fear. And the scary part for me was that, I don't really talk about it with a lot of people, but basically I spent a lot of my savings to build this game.
Right.
And it came out on mobile. We got featured by Apple, but given the type of game it was and the monetization strategy we had, it didn't make, nearly back what I put into it, not even close. So that's
Right.
part of the reason that we thought, hey, maybe we can put this game on Steam. And, even once it's out on Steam, not enough sales to, make back what we've done. Like, it made some money. I'm certainly not complaining. I know a lot of people make nothing or a couple $100. It did much better than that. But, certainly still, I had spent a lot of money to build this game at that point. And so you look at the bundles and, it's a fairly appealing option in a way because you're like, it's going to bring in some money. And the hope is that it kickstarts sales afterwards.
Right.
And I think it did a little bit because, we were in a couple of bundles and, I could say that probably, I think one of those kickstarted some sales afterwards for a little while, which was good. But you do have, you have a fear that, what if people suddenly think this game is worth 50 cents, instead of the actual price? Like, what are we going to do, right? So, and you can't take that back. The thing is, there's enough sites out there that,
That
have
track,
a history.
Yeah.
Yeah, so people can look and be like, well, I'm just going to wait for the next time that it's 50 cents or 75 cents or whatever. And so I think going forward for other games, I probably would not be putting them in a bundle. I know a lot of people say that they'll hold out until somebody like, say, Humble Bundle, would offer them something. And depending on the offer from that, and if the game had been out a while, I'd consider that. But I think going forward, my general rule of thumb is going to be at least if a game's maybe, 9 to 12 months that it's been out, maybe start considering it. But until then, I wouldn't bother because I do think it devalues the game a little bit.
Right. Would you say the same about Steam sales regarding devaluing?
It's complicated. It's pretty tough. I've heard all the arguments on both sides of the fence, and
Right.
I'm not entirely sure where I sit on that because, on the one hand, I've seen firsthand that, without a sale, the sales on LetterQuest dropped pretty low, right? Like to almost nothing.
Right.
And then we put the game on sale, even if it's 50% off, and suddenly, there's quite a bit of the game sells, and then it actually picks up for a little while afterwards. So clearly that does work, but it's hard to say if those sales didn't exist, if people would keep buying it all the time. I honestly don't know. I think Steam, the culture of people that is on Steam, they're looking for sales all the time.
Yeah, I would agree. It's unless you're a super hyped AAA game or even indie game, it's pretty difficult to get people to buy full price these days. When you know that every year you have at least 2 to 3 big sale periods, sale seasons.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's certainly the case. And I know even for myself, like what's happened is, when you have no money and you put everything you have into something, you start to watch every penny pretty closely.
Right.
And it got to the point for me when I was at, kind of my lowest money-wise, that I would have a game that came out on Steam that I saw that I was like, oh, I've been waiting for this for a year. And it was a $10 indie game. And I had a hard time actually going through with the purchase because the same thing kind of in the back of my brain as well. I don't have a lot of money. Maybe I should wait till it's a little bit cheaper or it's on sale.
Right.
And I've gotten over that now, and I try and push myself to actually buy things for full price. But I'd be lying if I said it doesn't give me a bit of pause sometimes, right? Where you're like, well, it'll be on sale in a month, and I don't have time to play games anyway, so it's like 6 months before I even play them.
Right.
So, but I've trained myself to try and buy things at full price because I'm hoping other people do the same, but it's tough.
Yeah, it is. What advice would you give to new guys or even other indie developers out there about marketing your game? Would you wait longer to put it in a bundle? Now that you've done it, would you have waited longer?
Yeah, I would. Certainly for any future titles I do too, I would wait longer. Again, it's going to come down to what you can afford to do, right?
Right.
I've got a friend that's a developer that's, released a couple of games. They're slightly smaller games that, he didn't put nearly as much time into or nearly as much money. And, I think for somebody like that, considering a bundle fairly quickly, if you're okay with that, like go for it, right? If you have no reason not to. But, if you put a few years work into something and you're trying to charge $10 or $15 for it and stuff, like, yeah, think pretty hard before you throw it in a bundle for, 20 cents or 50 cents or something, right? Because I don't think that that's worth it, because I think what happens afterwards is you just end up with thousands of your keys for your game being tossed around on the various contest sites and given away to people and stuff like this, right? And you could argue, hey, more people are playing it, but I'm not sure. Like, obviously it'd be nice that more people are playing it because they're actually buying it, but it's pretty complicated. I think it's a case by case basis, and like I said, I'd consider it very carefully if you've put a lot of time and attention into something, right? Don't give it away, basically, if you don't have to.
Yeah, I would say it's easier for people looking in to say, like, you should have waited. But when you put in, like, 2 years worth of your own cash, that's a bit hard to swallow sometimes.
It is, right? And it's funny because the thing you want people to know is, I'm not sitting here on a pile of money going, how can I get more money? Like, that's the furthest thing from the truth. I'm sitting here going, how can I get enough to even come close to making back what I put into this so that I can keep building more games, right? Because that's what I really want to do. And so I hope people, somebody can appreciate that, because that's what it comes down to at the end of the day, at least certainly in my case. I want to be able to keep doing this.
So yeah, for your next game, would you think about using Kickstarter so that the costs on your end won't be that high?
I'm not sure anymore that Kickstarter for most things, unless you have some kind of following, right? Like, I've seen the game that's come out by, the guy that made Castlevania, right? And so, of course, people jump on that and they're like, oh, wow, a new game from, this guy, great.
Yeah.
I think unless you have that.
The one thing I feel about those campaigns is not really to fund the game. It's a survey, basically.
Yes, I agree completely. It's just to get eyes on it.
Yeah, they do have publishers to give them money, regardless if it succeeds or not.
Yeah, and I think for anybody else, I think the days of Kickstarter being, oh, hey, I got $1 million or even $100,000 is really tough.
Right.
I think the best plan that a lot of people seem to be doing these days is almost simultaneous Steam Greenlight campaign as well as Kickstarter.
Right.
Because they kind of feed off each other, right? Like the Kickstarter drives attention to Greenlight, which gets your game through Steam Greenlight, and the Steam Greenlight campaign gets thousands of people funneled to your Kickstarter.
Right.
So at least it gets eyes on it, and I think that's a great idea, especially if you're looking to do early access for a title or something, right? You can build a following very quickly. But I think the days of going on Kickstarter and funding an entire game, it's pretty uncommon now.
Yeah, unless unless it's a well-known IP or you have a following, like you said.
Yeah, for sure.
How's the process for getting your game on Steam once you actually had a game on Steam? Like, do you still have to go through Greenlight and stuff?
It, as far as I'm aware, it depends on, like, it's a case-by-case basis. So with LetterQuest Remastered, I just reached out to somebody there and said, here's what I'm looking to do. It's basically a better version of the first LetterQuest. We're redoing the tech. We're going to give it away for free to all the people that, had paid for the first one and everything. And
Right.
they came back right away and said, yeah, sure, go for it. That's a great idea, right? Because to them, there's no downside. You're getting a better version of this game, more publicity for things like, obviously to them, that's great. I know other people that have got through Greenlight with a couple of games that didn't sell all that well at all, and they still had to keep going through Greenlight.
Right. So it's case by case basis, and there's somebody at Steam that will reply you basically.
Yeah, usually usually you've got a couple of contacts there, people that you've talked to at least a little bit, and you can kind of reach out to that. So
How is their response time to developers?
It's pretty good, honestly, especially in the forums. I probably can't say too much more than that, but because all of that stuff is under NDA for the most part. But no, like in the forums, they've been quite responsive actually, and some really nice people in there.
Cool. So yeah, don't really have much else. We pretty much reached the end of the interview.
Okay.
It's a really good one. I really enjoyed this.
Thanks.
So yeah, LetterQuest Grimm's Journey Remastered just released on Xbox One on April 8th. So tell people where can they follow you to get more updates about maybe your newer games or maybe about LetterQuest.
Sure, you can find us on Facebook or Twitter at the Bacon Bandits. And,
it's a nice name, by the way. How did you come up with that?
That one was, we threw around ideas for names for a long time because names are hard. Anybody will tell you.
Oh, yeah.
Names for a game or a company or whatever. And actually, it came down to the fact that we're from Canada. We grow up with eating bacon and maple syrup. Sounds like a total stereotype. It is a little bit, but it is true. Like there's always maple syrup around when I was growing up, and bacon and different things. So. And we always joke that, somebody's going to steal all the bacon or somebody's going to take it because that's what everybody wants.
Right.
And so it was actually Jake's, thing he threw out. He's like, what if somebody's like a bacon bandit? What if we're taking bacon, whatever? And he started doing up little concept sketches of a character that was a piece of bacon wearing a little, Canadian style toque. And, we just ran with it from there and then registered the name and away we went.
Cool. So yeah, Twitter, Facebook. You have a website?
We do. It's just baconbanditgames.com.
Cool. And you've been listening to Pooponoop on my channel. So yeah, you can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, blah, blah, blah. Like, comment, subscribe, and do check out LetterQuest Grimm's Journey if you have an Xbox One. Pretty cool. I feel they have a pretty cool indie community among the home consoles. So yeah. Thank you very much for listening and watching. We will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Awesome.